Morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever and
Wherever.
this may find you. Glad you guys have joined us again. We took a little break from our cryptid study last couple of weeks. One was on vacation, and then the next week we did a Christmas study. I haven't got that posted yet, but I will at some point. And then tonight we're back at it. We're going to move to the water weirdos.
Ah, the water weirdos.
So, what's a water weirdo?
Some weirdo that's in the water. That's just a guess.
As far as the study is concerned, the Loch Ness Monster is probably the most famous of the water cryptids,
Right.
but not the only one for sure. And it's not exclusive to Scotland or the British Isles. We also have them stateside.
Yep.
Some alleged water weirdos, water cryptids. So tonight, without delay, let's jump into these water weirdos. Let's start with the grandfather of them all, the Loch Ness Monster.
Yes.
Loch Ness Monster, and I'll introduce this one tonight.
Yes, sir.
Loch Ness Monster, by name Nessie,
Yes.
is a large marine creature believed by some to inhabit Loch Ness in Scotland.
Yes, it is.
Excuse me. However, much of the alleged evidence supporting its existence has been discredited, and it's widely thought that the monster is a myth. Take the next one.
Yeah, Loch Ness is a lake lying in the Highlands of Scotland with a depth of 788 feet and a length of about 23 miles. Loch Ness has the largest volume of fresh water in Great Britain. Some believe that this monster is a dinosaur or a family of dinosaurs that survived the last ice age. The plesiosaur was a long-necked marine reptile with 4 paddle-like fins and a tail. Most Nessie enthusiasts associate the unidentified monster with the plesiosaur, commonly believed to be extinct.
Yeah.
A geneticist from New Zealand's University of Otago announced that an intensive analysis of traces of DNA in the loch's icy waters has ruled out the presence of large animals such as dinosaurs, but there was a lot of eel DNA in the loch. Thus, the Loch Ness Monster may have been a giant eel.
Giant eel.
A giant eel, big eel. Proposed animals that could have resulted in misidentification are the massive eels, diving birds, otters, or seals. A gray seal seems to be most likely explanation of, as several Nessie sightings have occurred out of the water, and gray seals have long, flexible necks and paddle fins similar to those described on the monster.
All right. So, Jerry, you've heard the Loch Ness Monster before tonight.
Goodness, yes.
Tell me when you first remember hearing about the Loch Ness Monster.
It goes back as far as I can remember.
Really? It's
Yeah, I mean-
young child?
Yep, I was always familiar with the kind of cryptid stuff. I don't think I knew what cryptid was then, if it was even called cryptozoology then, but Bigfoot, Nessie, those UFOs that were all, back in the 70s and even in the 60s, the stuff I'd heard of. So
Yeah, I remember my first exposure to the cryptids and the Loch Ness Monster in particular was a book in the public library, school's library. I remember it was on the cover of a book, this very photograph we saw a moment ago. It was on
Oh,
the cover of the
yes.
book, and I think there was a Sasquatch in the book too. And
Yeah.
it mentioned Mysterious Creatures of the World. I forgot the title, but it was something like that.
yeah,
And these were all mythical creatures. Of course, I didn't know they were mythical. I just thought it was just a
yeah,
cool dinosaur out there somewhere floating around.
yeah.
So I have no opinion about Loch Ness Monster either way. People have claimed to have seen it, photographed it.
Right.
But again, we're going to see tonight is all these cryptids have an other explanation besides being a dinosaur or something else.
Right,
Maybe
right.
another explanations for these things. We saw a moment ago a gray seal or the eel are explanations of this.
Yeah. Eels, really. I mean, are otters, not eels, but otters are the ones that said that, when they go through the water together, it looks like, the
Undulating.
yeah, it
tail.
looks like the back of that serpentine sea monster. Of course, if it was a plesiosaur, then it would look more like the picture on the screen right now. But you've seen different descriptions of it. So
And we established in the Bigfoot study that eyewitness testimony is not considered scientific evidence.
right,
Saying that's enough to convict a person of murder, right? It's enough to put somebody behind bars for the rest of their life, but it's
Yeah.
not enough to convince the scientific community. You can convince a jury that someone's guilty, uses evidence, but you can't convince a scientist
wow,
apart from the capture
right,
or the, live or dead capture of one of
right.
these things.
Yeah, I'm preaching through, or not preaching through. It's preaching from Luke over Christmas, and Luke's big into eyewitness testimony, and I mean that's well, there's a lot of historical evidence that substantiates all the eyewitness testimony, but certainly eyewitness testimony in the Bible is very, very important.
Right. Anything you don't have a physical specimen in your hands
Right.
is either eyewitness testimony or sometimes just theorized to exist.
Yep.
Like we theorize certain things in space exist, but we haven't seen them, dark matter or whatever. We say
Right.
these things must exist because we see reactions to other things around it. But as far as handling a thing, we've not handled a lot. Yes, we've not handled a lot of things we believe to be true.
Science has been wrong before. The experts have proven less trustworthy than we'd hoped it on certain things. So.
And so, a lot of people who are honest otherwise, they claim to see the Loch Ness monster.
Yeah.
So we got to think that they're seeing something.
Well, I mean, it's across the whole board of cryptids. There's just hundreds and hundreds of reports and testimonies of people that are convinced that they've seen something, whatever it would be.
Over 4,000 eyewitness accounts of Sasquatch alone in this country.
Right.
And that's those who've come forward with reports.
Right.
And you could probably say multiply that by 5
Yeah.
of those who've seen and didn't want to say anything
Yeah.
for fear of losing their job or being ridiculed. Or
Yeah,
whatever the
I
case
mean,
may
you're not talking just a bunch of yahoos in the woods. People, doctors, lawyers, whatever.
Judges,
Yeah,
politicians.
that have seen things.
Politicians may not be so credible.
Well, yeah,
But judges, law enforcement officers,
Yeah.
people who are otherwise good citizens, are honest. But the same is true of people vacationing in Loch Ness and see this thing come out of the water and move across. They're seeing something. It's probably not just entirely a hoax.
Yeah. Well, granted, if I was able to take a vacation and camp out there on Loch Ness, sure that's going to be on my mind because I've always been aware of it. I'm sure I'd be looking, but I'd hope to have something that was convincing, not just a shadow or something.
It would be easier to find the Loch Ness monster than Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Just because the Loch Ness is so, it's a confined space.
Right.
It's so deep, it's so long, it's so wide.
Right.
You've got sonar technologies, you've got all kinds of technologies to
Right.
go down there and really depth finders to find an animal of this size. And if it's an animal, it can't live forever.
No,
Right? It's
no.
gonna have a viable breeding population. It has to be more than one.
Right.
So some folks speculate that maybe there's in this channel there's a way to get out to the ocean,
Right.
open waters.
I've seen that.
And if that's the case, then all bets are off.
Yeah.
If it just comes into the channel every so often to chase fish to eat and then
The eel.
right?
All the eel that's there.
Yeah. And then it submerges and goes back in the water and goes back through a channel to get back out of the ocean. That's
Right.
one thing. That's why it will explain why you don't find it.
Right.
So besides the dinosaur, what kind of known animal might the Loch Ness
Yeah.
monster be?
Well, we looked at the otters and giant eels. What are some other things that were mentioned?
Gray seals.
Yeah, gray seals, those kinds of things that we know are there. But other than that, it's a plesiosaur.
Right. Well, given the amount of newly discovered species in 2021,
Uh-huh.
is it possible that the monster is just an unidentified animal?
Yeah, I think that's always a possibility.
That's something we haven't figured out.
Yeah,
what
I
it
mean,
is
there
yet.
was a
It's
a
something.
blonde mole that they hadn't seen in 80 years.
A blonde mole?
A blonde mole, I forget where.
Wow.
But just kind of perused the picture and the caption underneath it, and there was somebody got a picture of it, and so this wasn't a new creature, but they're discovering new species all the time.
Or the Japanese fishermen that found this fish is supposed to be extinct for
Yeah.
thousands of years.
Yeah,
So sometimes just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
right,
Yeah, the old saying is true. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
right,
So I have to keep that in mind.
right.
So let's look at the Ogopogo.
Yes, Ogopogo.
In Canadian folklore, the Ogopogo is a lake monster said to inhabit Okanagan Lake in British Columbia, Canada. Some scholars have charted the entity's development from First Nations folklore and widespread water monster folklore motifs. The Okanagan Lake is a lake in Okanagan Valley, British Columbia, Canada. The lake is 84 miles long and 84 miles long between 2.5 miles and 3.5 miles wide. I should say that was I misread that. So 84 miles long and 3 miles wide, basically. Surface area of 135 square miles. That's just the square miles from the top of the lake. It's got cubic gallons of water, whatever the case would be. In American folklore, Chessie is a sea monster said to live in the midst of the Chesapeake Bay. So before we get to Chessie, Ogopogo.
Yeah, it's just like with the Sasquatch. There's Native American, whatever the politically correct term is these days, First Nation.
First Nation.
These are characters, creatures that go back before, the European settlement of North America. And I don't know how that pans out in Europe. I know with the Sasquatch creatures, those early, all across all cultures, there's the wild man mythology that's very ancient. And it's true here. You have something that's similar to Nessie that is, the First Nation people are aware of. So it's not just something Europeans have conjured up. It's a pretty old tradition.
So you have multiple traditions that relate to this animal existing. Could be some truth to that. The more eyewitnesses, the better off, likelihood it is. So then let's go to the next one.
Right.
Chessie, take that one.
All right. In American folklore, Chessie is a sea monster said to live in the midst of the Chesapeake Bay. Claims of sightings appear in local media and regionally themed books from 1936 onward.
Chessie. Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah. Chessie system was a railroad line.
Was it really?
Well, I thought it was the Chesapeake Bay and something, but they called it the Chessie system, but it had nothing to do with the water creature.
Well, we're familiar with the Loch Ness Monster, but let's show you two more examples here in North America where these water weirdos are.
Yeah.
Whatever this creature is said to be is spotted. So it could possibly be on the same kind of animal, and the Loch Ness could have access to other waterways, and it could get out and cross the oceans and breed, and then every so often you see this. If Loch Ness Monster exists, it's not the same one for the last 300 years.
No.
That one has died. You're seeing different generations of it probably.
Right.
Just like people say, I saw Bigfoot. Well, Bigfoot's not a singular animal. It is a species of animal.
Yeah.
There's different ones, obviously.
Yeah, if he's just one, he's close to being omnipresent. So.
Right. And old.
Very old.
That's what the Mormons had said in the tradition, that the Cain, who wanders the face of the earth, is the Sasquatch, a hairy guy that wanders the face of the earth. Again, there's no truth to that.
That's why he throws rocks, I guess, at stuff, because
right.
Cain killed his brother Abel, we're assuming, with a boulder.
That makes sense. He's an excellent rock thrower.
Yeah.
But I don't buy into that at all. Cain died eventually. He died that side of the flood. He's history.
Yep.
How about the Kraken?
Oh, we've all heard of the Kraken.
Sure. And when you see these old maps, these old maritime maps that are hand-drawn, you'll see on the corner or somewhere a Kraken,
Always.
And people have said, that's just a mythical creature that they put up, drew, added to the map to add some flavor or some character.
Yeah.
There was nothing to the Kraken.
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Legends abound among ancient seafarers of a gigantic squid-like sea monster that viciously attacks and sinks ships. Stories of this creature, called the Kraken, seem to have begun in the 12th century Norway and have inspired famous accounts like those found in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Moby Dick. The oldest stories describe the creature as the size of an island and extremely fierce. As the years passed by, the story got a little tamer and the creature somewhat smaller. Eventually, the idea of a massive squid-like creature was completely dismissed, and the scientific community laughed at the thought of such a sea monster.
Did you see the photograph? There's a photograph of it.
Oh, it's a giant squid. While the stories of the Kraken are surely greatly exaggerated, they were thought by many scientists in previous decades to be complete fabrications until giant squid were rediscovered, not newly discovered, but rediscovered and documented. While there have been no officially documented squid attack on boats, stories do exist from the last century of boats being attacked by giant squid. This has led many to believe that perhaps legendary stories of Kraken are based on reality and simply exaggerated stories of giant or colossal squid attacks. So, yeah, it's like fishing stories. The fish tends to grow a little bit when the story is told. But
that's right.
Yeah, they found giant squid. And you've seen whales with the sucker marks on their faces, or the squids. They fought with squids. I think one species of whale loves to eat giant squids. So you can imagine. I mean, I don't want to be in a kayak with a giant squid swimming along there.
And we're talking about if the boats, the ancient Norwegian boats or whatever, were smaller, then a giant squid would be much larger. We're talking about a squid large enough to take down, say, a modern cruise ship.
Oh, no.
We're talking about ancient seafaring vessels, and the legends begin to develop when men start taking long voyages across open waters that were we never thought about crossing the Atlantic Ocean, a body of water that big. Said before the Middle Ages, or maybe Vikings may have hopped across the northern islands,
Yeah.
but crossing the open Atlantic, going from Europe to North America, that's a daunting task, a terrifying undertaking to cross. And even if you knew there's land on the other side, to know all that lay between you and the other side of the world, you know.
There's some stuff, funky stuff in the water. I mean, the deeper you go, the weirder it gets. And certainly, the Kraken is not such a creepy, deep sea thing like some of these joker fish or sharks or whatever they're called, other deep sea creatures. But obviously, there's Krakens, and that's.
And so the consensus of the community of scientists was that it just didn't exist. This was just stories. The character on the map, no basis in reality, was totally made up. What likely happened was, we know it does exist. It has existed. It would surface. They'd catch it in the nets as they're fishing out in the ocean. They're trying to gather lunch for the day. They're casting nets and they're bringing these things in. I can imagine how terrifying it would be. Like a fish story. What may have been 8-foot tentacles becomes 70-foot tentacles by the time the story is told and retold.
Oh, yes.
And so these things tend to legend kind of develops around these stories. So what happened in basic reality kind of evolved to whatever.
Right.
Those kind of things naturally happen.
Yeah, so I think, we could say that the Kraken is a story based upon a giant squid. I think we could say that yeah, it exists.
Without a doubt. And I think that maybe the dragon stories that we have, many cultures have the dragon stories, are nothing more than fossilized remains of the pterodactyls that we discovered, right?
Yeah.
Scaly reptiles that flying, obviously lizard-looking creatures. And so when you find these things, they may have made stories up about, imagine if this were alive.
Oh, yeah.
It looked, and it's fire breathing and all those kinds of things.
Right. Well, some of those giant dinosaur footprints with Glen Texas, or wherever they are, if First Nation people, see these footprints, I mean, they can identify footprints, and I mean, you're left with the thought of, this is a dragon or some sort of giant creature. And anyway.
And you create stories out of footprints, not that indifferent than the way paleontologists create dinosaurs out of a single tooth.
Yeah.
Or a hip bone or something.
I saw we're talking about Bigfoot a while ago, Gigantopithecus. I think it was based on a tooth and maybe a part of the jaw, right?
I think so.
So I saw the full-scale replica of the thing, and it didn't have ape feet. They put human-type feet on it, So, I mean, you don't know that from a tooth and a jaw.
Right. That's extrapolating quite a bit from a jaw.
But instead of the primate type of spread foot, this one actually had a human foot with the toes all up front. So that trying to sell that Bigfoot story, I guess.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to say it ape-like foot, I can say it a human-like foot. I mean, we've got nothing to go on. We're just basically guessing. But anyway.
Right.
But I think if let's say they were out turning up dirt, planting something, Native Americans or First Nations people, and they uncovered a fossil of something that didn't exist at their time.
Yeah.
I can see where they would create a story.
Oh, yeah.
This is the phoenix, the flying phoenix, whatever this thing would be.
Yeah, Thunderbird for the.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all these mythological creatures, undiscovered creatures, folkloric creatures. There's a lot of ancient memory attached to these things.
Mm-hmm.
So
cultures all share stories, pass those down,
yeah.
and they get elaborated and grow as time goes on.
Always.
Just like the Kraken has done.
Yep.
Well, we can go to a modern day giant squid and say, "There's your Kraken."
Yeah. Don't do Kraken.
Which gives us that love to study Bigfoot and cryptids some hope that some of these things are really real.
Yeah.
So, question 2: in what ways do legends come to explain actual animals?
Yeah, I think you touched on it a second ago with discovering a fossil or a bone of something that you don't recognize, it's not known to you or your people or whatever. That this is maybe something of legend or story that's been passed down. You've heard about the Thunderbird. Maybe this is part of the Thunderbird.
What are some possible explanations of a sea monster cryptids?
Yeah, I think as far as the Kraken is concerned, obviously we can point to the giant
Mystery
squid.
solved.
Yeah, it doesn't even the artist representations, the iconography, whatever you want to call it, these things, it looks like a squid. So it's pretty easy.
Well, let's take a look at what the Bible says about sea monsters.
Yeah.
The Bible is not silent on these subjects.
Right.
Leviathan, in Jewish mythology, is a primordial sea serpent. Its source is pre-biblical, a Mesopotamian myth. So even before the Bible was penned in ancient Mesopotamia, the idea of a Leviathan was still around.
Yeah.
Especially that the sea monster is the Ugaric, I know that is. It's a myth of Baal.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament, Leviathan appears in Psalm 74:14 as a multi-headed sea serpent that is killed by God and is given as food to the Hebrews in the wilderness.
Kind of smacks of the Hydra, the multi-headed creature.
Right. Isaiah 27:1, Leviathan is a serpent and a symbol of Israel's enemies who will be slain by God. In Job 41, it's a sea monster and a symbol of God's power over creation. The Bible is a pre-scientific book.
Right.
We have to realize that it's not. It doesn't do a taxonomy or doesn't categorize animals and about warm-blooded and reptiles and all those kind of things. It's not. It's a book before the modern scientific era, obviously. When describing animals that sound fantastic or unbelievable, there are several passages. There's several ways of interpreting these passages. So we're going to show you a passage from Job that relates to Leviathan, and then we're going to look at some ways to interpret that.
Okay.
So let's take the text if you. So here's the ways. So first, there's a literal interpretation. These are actual animals that are now extinct.
Okay.
They did live. They did move about. People saw them. They wrote about them, but they've just, as a lot of animals, have just died out.
Yeah.
We know animals that did live that are now extinct.
Yeah.
The second, are there beasts that never actually existed but are just used metaphorically?
Sure.
They're totally made up and they're just metaphors.
Right.
Or number three, they're exaggerated descriptions of actual animals extinct or still living.
Okay.
So the behemoth, they say, is just an elephant or a hippo, right? Still living, but the features were exaggerated. Or the leviathan is a whale or some kind of or an alligator or crocodile. It's still living, but it was exaggerated to prove a point or just tell some kind of a story.
Certainly so. At times.
So here's your text.
Job 41. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a wild bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? I wouldn't. Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, the hope of man is false. He's laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? Who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. I will not keep silence concerning his limbs, or his mighty strength, or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Round his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other. They cannot be separated. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils come forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals and flames. A flame comes forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable. His heart is hard as a stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him slingstones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His underparts are like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep be white-haired. On earth there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride.
All right. Thank you for reading those verses. Appreciate that.
You bet. It's Godzilla.
It is. I've not seen the Godzilla -1. Have you seen
It's
it yet?
good.
You've
It's
seen
very.
it?
Oh, it's great.
Man, I need
It's
to go
really
see it.
great.
I've heard good things.
Yeah,
good things about it.
it's really good.
A budget of like $15 million, and it's
Yeah, it's
well
raked in.
surpassed that.
Yeah, it's done well for a Godzilla movie.
Critical success, financial success, and this seems to describe something like a Godzilla.
Yeah,
creature.
something huge.
The book of Job is kind of laid out like this. The first couple of chapters we see. The first chapter, Job is described in very lofty terms. A righteous man,
right.
none like him in all the earth. He's blameless. He's devout. He's upright. Some might say uptight
Uptight, yeah,
because he doesn't go to the parties.
right.
But he has adult kids and sons and daughters, and he's measured in terms of wealth,
Right.
possessions, things that he owns, family.
Yeah,
Wealth is determined that way too in the ancient world, and the number of kids that he has,
yeah. Lots of livestock
and his health. All these things, he shows how good off Job is because he's been faithful.
Right.
God has blessed him. And then, of course, we know Satan will come before God 3 times and will plead with God behind the curtain in heaven. Job didn't see this. This is important for us to understand who may suffer in our lives.
Right.
We don't know why we suffer. Neither did Job.
Right.
Because all this takes place. We're privy to peeking behind Oz's curtain.
Right.
But we don't know what happens behind the sovereign curtain in heaven.
That's
So
right.
that's what's happening. 3 times. And eventually God says, you can touch Job, but you can't take his life.
Right.
So after having all of his material possessions gone, and then after having his children gone, that's something you got to wrestle with ethically, how God took those kids away.
Right.
And then finally, they were adults, so they weren't babies.
Yeah, they weren't little kids having a birthday party, Chuck E. Cheese.
And then finally, having his health taken.
Right. Right.
And one of the phrases about Job early on is that one of the cool things about Job is that he offered sacrifices for his kids' sins that they might have done.
Right.
So he's the patriarch of the family. He's God. He's the priest of the family. He's the lead worshiper of the family. And so he is doing all these things. And his character is established in the first chapter, but it's revealed in the next 40 chapters.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's established. This is who he is.
Right.
And so what happens after this? Eventually, God takes everything away except for his wife, who becomes an antagonist in the story.
Yes.
Because when she comes to him after he's in misery with boils from the tops of his head, the soles of his feet, he's sitting in a pile of ashes, scraping himself with a broken pot. His material possessions are reduced to nothing, just a broken pot. She says, just curse God and die. Now, she's right. If he cursed God, it would all be over. It would be wrapped up. And Job's response is, naked I came into the world, naked I'll leave. Why would I be so unkind to God? He's been so good to me.
Right.
And then the phrase here, in all this, Job did not sin.
Right.
Which is pretty awesome. Now, Job doesn't know. If Job could have cursed God, why did you do this to me? And he would have been right, in a sense, to do that, right? Because from the same hand that comes the blessing comes the curse. He could have cursed God in the sense that he could have said, God, you did this to me. Why did you make me suffer? He doesn't know why he's suffering.
Right.
And he never knows why he suffers. That's the cool part. Unless he reads the book, he never gets to know.
Right.
So for the next 35 chapters or so, Job's friends, Zophar, Bildad, and I, who come to him repeatedly with questions. And basically, the question is this: Job, what did you do?
Yeah.
If you sinned, we know you sinned. Just confess, tell us, tell God. It'll all be behind you. And Job was like, I didn't do it. I don't know what I did. As far as I know, I'm still that blameless, upright guy. As you read about in the first chapter of this book, go back to that and read that again, right? That's the divinely inspired scripture. As far as I know, I didn't. Well, Job gets to the end of these 35 chapters or so, and he says, when God, I'd love to have audience with God.
Yeah.
I would love to meet God face to face, and when I meet with him, I'm gonna really ask him a series of questions.
Yeah.
Careful what you ask for, because God shows up in chapter 38.
Right.
And when God shows up, guess what happens to those questions Job has to ask? He doesn't.
Right.
He says, I sit here with my hand over my mouth.
Right.
And guess who does the asking of the questions?
Right. It's God.
That's right. And you read probably 36 questions. Where were you? And they don't even get to the questions before this. Where were you when made the earth?
Yeah.
Where were you when I hung the stars? Where were you when I made the oceans go so far and no further? Where were you when I scooped the valleys out and built mountains? Where were you when I did these things? It gets this creature, Leviathan. If you think you're mighty, Job, right, going to approach my presence with questions, I'm going to show you one little creature, one little worm that I've made and drop him in the ocean. I'd like to see you put a bit in his mouth. I'd like to
Right.
see you ride him with a saddle. I'd like to see you stick javelins in him. I'd like to see you go out fishing for him. Why, he'd eat you alive, Job. I'd like to see you put a leash around him and bring him home to your daughters. I'd
Right.
love to see you do these things, Job.
Right.
Well, God will use the example of this massive sea creature to put Job in his place.
Right.
I think we have to assume that God is describing a creature Job would have been familiar with.
I think so. I mean, he so far he's spoken in language that that Job can understand.
Quite literal
Yeah,
language.
and completely could understand this. And obviously, if God is going to use this creature to make his point, then it would seem to me that it would go beyond just based on a pagan myth.
Right.
I mean, Job might have been aware of the pagan myth, but I don't think it being a pagan myth carries the weight that a real creature would.
Right. Job could have said, that's a pagan myth, God. Or I'll take him on tomorrow.
Right.
That's like me taking on Frankenstein's monster.
Right.
He doesn't exist. I'll
Right.
beat him up tomorrow.
Right.
But he must be using a real monster by analogy to show
Yeah.
his power in contrast to Job's frailty.
I mean, God. I believe God created everything, and that includes the dinosaurs. I mean,
Sure.
what's a dinosaur?
Just a giant, that means a great lizard.
Yeah,
Or a dinosaur.
yeah. I mean, they're huge. I would say, it would be a monster. If I saw a T-Rex stomping through the backyard, I'd say there's a monster in the backyard.
Right.
I don't want nothing to do with that
You'd
thing.
go inside and lock the door.
Yeah, and don't move. I don't.
Right. So then the book of Job, started the outline, and I got through most of it. In the end of this, Job gets the one thing he fears the most. Because in the time of ancient Israel, one of the things you feared, like Moses will show us in his encounter with God, is the fear of the presence of God.
Yeah.
And that's what Job gets in the end. He gets the presence of God. Now,
Right.
God does reward him with stuff, but that's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is that Job gets God.
Right.
And Job learns to trust even when he doesn't know why.
That's the application for us all. In describing creatures, one of the things that we in the modern age forget is how wild the world was. And not that long ago, it was dangerous to go in the woods.
Right.
There were just bears, wolves, mountain lions, stuff that could. You just read old stories from early settlements in America, or the Wild West, or Little House on the Prairie, panthers stalking the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that stuff's starting to come back again, but certainly, the ancient world was dangerous, and these creatures, whatever creature this was that God created, Job certainly knew how fearful it was.
Right. And the descriptions, scales that were like armor,
Yeah.
breathing out fire. I think the fire may have been a description of maybe exhaling in the water, making bubble debris.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there
things.
is a beetle. Well, I forget what the beetle's called, but it,
Like a spark.
it shoots fire out of his rear end. So I had an uncle like that.
Sounds like you after Wendy's chili, maybe.
Right.
I'm just joking. But yeah, so maybe that's what this is describing. It's certainly a sea monster.
Yeah.
I don't know how a fire-breathing creature would do well in the
Yeah.
water.
Just have to not drink any or breathe underwater.
Right. It wouldn't hunt with that because all of its food would be under the water. So
Yeah.
I think it's probably more of the when you churn up the bubbles and it creates this image of that.
Yeah.
That's probably what that's a description of. Well, does Job consider Leviathan a literal animal or a mere metaphor?
I mean, I think it's a literal animal. That's where my money's at.
It makes the most sense in the context in which it's given here.
Right. Right.
Now, if taken literally, what kind of animals would this describe?
Yeah. I mean, there were, gigantic crocodiles or alligators. I mean, beasts, but
Rows of teeth,
rows of teeth.
scales,
I don't know
armor.
how many. The scales being tight. I don't know what modern creature could compare an extinct creature that would have scales other than fish, but
Well, reptiles have a scaly kind of
yeah,
skin.
yeah,
So it could describe something like that, a giant sea lizard of some sort.
yeah.
But it seems like at the time of the writing of Job, and there's different theories of when Job was written. Was it at the time of the poetry like Solomon in that era?
Right.
Was it written intertestamental? Well, it wasn't. We know it's not written that late. Or was it written antediluvian area?
Right. I mean, most Christians think Job is convinced that Job is the oldest book in the Bible. So it would.
I agree with that.
Yep.
Well, if it's taken literally, maybe it describes. I think this some of the scholarship opinions of scholars, I'll say, is that it just describes a giant sea crocodile, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw, I mean, we were on vacation years ago, and we went to Atlanta and went to different places, and there was National Geographic set up in a mall, and they were giving away T-shirts and this prize for this, gigantic. And they had a replica of the fossils laid out. The thing was huge. It
Mm.
looked like a monster. I mean, I ended up putting my name in the hat. I won the T-shirt, the hat, keychain, magnet,
Wow.
whatever. But it
And the
was,
fossil.
yeah. I didn't get to take the fossil home, but it was, if it was that, I could see that. I mean, you wouldn't get near that thing if it was chomping around.
That may have been an average sized.
Yeah.
Maybe some much larger. That's the one that survived.
Right.
Became a fossil. Well, so literally, it could be a lot of things, or things we don't even know
Yeah.
about.
So does this rock our boat as Christians that there was a giant sized creature? And I'm saying again, the dinosaurs existed. So why can't something like this exist?
You can be a Christian and believe in dinosaurs. They're not
Oh.
mutually exclusive.
No, I mean the fossils are there. It's more than a tooth or a jaw. I mean, we have complete fossils of these creatures that once walked the earth, and to me, uh, if they existed, then all this other stuff could probably exist. So,
I agree. Ezekiel 29:3. I'll let you voice rest.
all right, I'll sit back and enjoy the reading of the word.
Speak and say, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lies in the midst of his streams that says, my Nile is my own, I made it for myself.
Mm.
Again, so we know that there are crocodiles in the Nile.
Definitely.
Those African crocodiles that could be described as something like a dragon.
Yeah, there were crocodile cults in Egypt. They've discovered mummified crocodiles at different sites in Egypt. People worship these things. And certainly, we've caught American alligators here that are gigantic. So, again, no problem.
Well, here's some theological implications.
Genesis 1:20-23 again. God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living thing, every living creature that moves with which the waters swarm, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning the fifth day.
Right? So we see the creation of sea creatures in the Bible.
Yes.
Excuse me, I haven't coughed all day. Just allergic to you, maybe.
Man, I appreciate it.
Does the creation account provide for the possibility of creatures like the Leviathan?
Definitely.
It certainly, I think it says it explicitly.
Not an issue.
Would the existence of the Leviathan or water cryptid discredit the tenets of Christianity?
No way. Again, if God created it, it's not a problem. If you believe God created dinosaurs, then certainly He can create a Leviathan.
Yeah, it's just that whatever it is, it's a created thing. It's not some
It's not a
spiritual element that's come from outside of the known universe that's popped up here.
right.
And we know of animals that either exist now or did exist at one time that would certainly explain the Leviathan or Chestir.
Now, if you were in the mountains of wherever the mountain gorillas are at in Africa, and you've never heard of a gorilla before, or a monkey for that matter, any kind of primate, you're traipsing along there, and for some weird reason you're in the mountains of Africa.
Yeah.
And you come across a troop or whatever, a group of gorillas are called. Man, what are you going to think that thing is? You're going to say it's a monster.
Right. It has hands like eyes, facial features.
Looks like a humanoid creature. So it's not a problem. I mean, none of this stuff should affect our Christianity.
Absolutely. It would take more than this to shake your faith.
I don't think so.
What would shake my faith is to produce the body of Christ in a tomb in Jerusalem.
Right, yeah. Yep.
That's the hard evidence it would take to discredit
That would ruin everything. That would just dismantle Christianity down to the core.
Yep. And stop being a Christian. Stop doing this.
Yeah.
Do something else in your life. So I think if you're a Christian and you're interested in cryptids like the water weirdos we talked about tonight, as long as it doesn't take away from your other responsibilities, providing for your family or
Right.
other things you got to do, there's no harm at all in this.
Yeah, I think, like if you keep it in that context, then you're safe. But you could say the same thing about the people that go off the deep end on eschatology.
Right.
I mean, they just skip all other theological studies, and they just dwell on eschatological issues to the extent that they're obnoxious with it.
Yeah, it invades every walk of life.
Yeah.
Every headline of the news becomes interpreted as some
Right.
kind of scheme or rubric they have, and
Right.
yeah, it's unhealthy.
Very unhealthy.
But it's unhealthy to go the either extreme or unhealthy. To
Right.
say, well, I don't need to study anything about God's creation because I'm focused on the return of Christ or whatever the case may be. Well,
Right.
that's unhealthy
Right.
too.
Right. You got to keep it balanced. The same with this. I mean, we live in a world that, if it's not cryptids, then it's mythology, it's folklore, whatever it is, aliens to Chessie, Nessie, and Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
You live in a world with this kind of stuff, and you're a Christian, and you just need to navigate these waters and be able to provide a reasoned answer from Scripture for whoever needs to hear it.
Yeah. So what we're doing with the study is we're providing a Christian worldview on cryptids, aren't we?
Yep.
We're saying that don't shake your faith. It's
Right.
perfectly fine. Here's some reasons why this might be or might not be, might not exist. End of the day, God could have said in the Bible, perhaps he could have said, Job, consider my friend the Sasquatch.
Right.
Are you able to stick a bone through his nose and pull a tooth out of his head?
Are you able to capture him on film?
Right. That's right. Job would have said, no,
I don't even know what film is, Lord. I don't know what a camera is.
That's right. Well, anyway, this is fun stuff. Glad you guys joined us tonight.
Yeah.
Any parting words of
No,
wisdom?
it's just a good study. I just appreciate, the Christian worldview. We can talk about anything.
Yeah, nothing's off the table.
Nothing's off the table.
As long as it's done with decency,
Right,
with
right.
sensitivity, we can talk
Right.
about anything.
Right.
And as well, we should have a Christian worldview about everything,
Yeah.
whether it's race relationships or politics or economics. You should have a Christian perspective on everything that you do.
Exactly. The Bible gives us that view, the worldview that we need to talk about all of these things. Everybody has a worldview. So.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Even Joe Pagan out here.
Joe Pagan, he's got a very staunch worldview. His beliefs are pretty set in stone.
And he lives by that. He's very devout in what he believes. He practices what he believes.
Interprets the reality that he, through that lens. So.
If tomorrow they caught the Ogopogo or Chessie or Loch Ness with the hook and brought it in, dissected this and had the film crew there, and I'd be like, yeah, that's great. My faith wouldn't be shaken at all.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm not going to sell my house and move to higher ground or something.
Right.
It's going to keep chugging along and think, well, I'm glad they found that's cool.
Same thing with all the cryptids.
Yeah, and I'd say maybe there's more.
I mean, now, if there's a cryptid like a dog man, I might have to get a bigger gun or something.
Yeah. I mean, even there, it's not going to rock my faith, but it will rock my pocketbook when I have to purchase more ammunition, firearms to protect myself from the monsters.
Any pressing prayer concerns tonight?
Just a lot of sickness, general sickness with people.
It's the season, man.
It is, and people are traveling, so we'll just praying for everybody to be healthy and safe.
Yeah, I coughed a couple times. I just got dry. I don't feel like there's no protection.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate that. I don't have the COVIDs.
Yeah, the COVIDs. Get that
Close out
COVID.
prayer.
Yes, Father, thank you for our time together. Thank you for this study and for the effort that goes into research and technology and the PowerPoints, things that we can sit here and have a decent study. And we thank you for Jared and his energy, Lord, and his ability. Thank you for our churches that we pastor and for the people who are your sheep. We pray for each and every one of them, for health and safety, Lord, for whatever their needs are, that you'd meet them. Be with our families, our friends and neighbors. And Lord, thank you for being such a marvelous creator who has made so many wonderful things. And Lord, thank you for this beautiful world that you have created for us to live in, to glorify your name. Let us live each day for your glory in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, guys, we'll see you same bat time.
Same bat channel.
Live long and prosper.
Indeed.